suppose, and I'm just wondering, as by way of conclusion, and you had ample opportunity to observe this during your years on the bench, and I mean, certainly now there's no reason to suggest otherwise. You've written extensively as well. The law and its execution and the practice is often criticised, wrongly and rightly, as a bit of a blunt instrument. But you've been saying, and I know you've said elsewhere too, there's certainly room for a nuanced interpretation of things, and for that matter, the nuanced practice and understanding of things. So are you hopeful in a way, in a sense, that despite whatever pendulums are going on in our society, that there can be, I suppose, room to move and, in a sense, I suppose, the chance for progression, if you like, in justice and the treatment of people, I suppose, is what I'm getting at.
Absolutely. And people's views change. In fact, only today I was given a book to read on Ronald Ryan, the last man hanged in Victoria. Now, no government in Australia today would advocate a return to capital punishment, but I remember very clearly those times. I can remember as a schoolboy when Jean Lee and Andrews and Clayton were hanged in 1950, I think it was, and there was a strong feeling in large sections of the community that the death penalty was an appropriate punishment. Same with the lash. The lash. Even in my time at the bar, there was a district court judge who sentenced a person to so many lashes, which the government of the day wouldn't carry out. But in Victoria, the notorious William John O'Mealy was actually whipped as a result of some offence he did while he was in prison. His case went up to the High Court. So, I mean, people's attitudes change. People see things very, very, very differently.
There's a bit of a swing back at the moment. You hear more people baying for heavier sentences. You get the impression often that people would be only too happy to bring back capital punishment, for example.
Well, I'm sure there are sections of the community that are in favour of capital punishment, but I would think that any poll would show that those against it today are far greater in numbers and in percentages than they were back in the 50s or 60s. I mean, they had the death penalty for rape. I appeared in a case called Galleen, and afterwards Justice Clancy called me around to his chambers. Galleen got convicted and he was sentenced to 4 years, and Justice Clancy said to me, what did you think of the sentence? And I think he expected me to say I was only been at the bar 2 or 3 years. It was a soft sentence or something to that effect. I said to him, it was about what I expected. And he said to me, Mr. McHugh, he called me. He said, Mr. McHugh, he said, I've sentenced men to death for rape. And he had too. In the case of the Leonard Lawson, who raped a number of artist models, he presided at that trial and sentenced him to death and said he saw no reason why the death penalty shouldn't be carried out. And in Lawson's case, subsequent events showed that maybe that should have happened, because Lawson got out of jail and he murdered another young woman. In fact, he murdered 2 women. I think there was one at a school down near Bowral, Moss Vale, and one over, I think, at Manly. So, however, there seems to be a bit of evidence gathering in the United States that a lot of people have been sentenced to death. They shouldn't have been sentenced to death.
So just finally then, Michael, and looking back, I get an impression from you. You personally don't see through a glass too darkly. You've somehow found that rather golden means of being able to see life in fairly equal quantities, as it were.
What do you want me to comment on that last statement? Or?
Well, I'm just interested because let me be honest. I've interviewed people who I think, in a sense, have, despite a whole life dedicated to the law, have been perhaps personally rather disappointed in the end. Some others, conversely, felt that they've really done their best they could, felt they've advanced law as a public policy area. What about yourself?
Well, I've said, I may not be joking, that if I was 23 again, I'd head for Wall Street. I'm very interested in markets and shares and commerce. One of the reasons I went on the bench was that I came to the view that cross-examination in the hands of a competent barrister was a base art. I became a bit disillusioned after the Kumar-Varnoff Royal Commission. I cross-examined Coombe for 11 hours, and Coombe later said that although he'd been given a subsidy to write a book, he couldn't relive the cross-examination. But it wasn't only me, it was Stephen Charles who cross-examined him as well. But the competent barrister's got a huge advantage on the witness. For many years I was very proud of a cross-examination I did when I was quite a young junior, which was a committal for rape, and the second last question or the third last question I asked the woman was, and that was another lie, wasn't it? And she said yes, and I said to her, and the evidence you've given against these men is lies, isn't it? And she said yes, it is. And that was the end of the case. Now, with age and experience, I've come to the view that after 6 hours of cross-examination, she would have said anything to get out of that witness box, and she caught in inconsistencies in her evidence, and that the pressure on her was just like the suspect being interrogated by the police ultimately.
A star chamber.
They confess to matters that maybe are not true at all, but they just want to get out. Their spirit is broken. I mean, that was one of Smythe's assets, that he broke people's will. He cross-examined Dr. Garrity, who had a PhD, brought an action against Nationwide News, and at the end of 2 days of Smythe's cross-examination, I think if he'd asked Dr. Garrity whether his mother was an Afghan, she would have said yes. He would have said yes. And in the first Voyager Royal Commission, there's little doubt that the Smythe cross-examination brought about a miscarriage of justice. Admiral McNichol, I think it was, wrote a subsequent book in which he, on that first Voyager Royal Commission, in which he said that Smythe got the young officers on the Voyager, the Melbourne, I can't remember which, on the Voyager, to make admissions which were just contrary to the truth. And part of the Smythe technique of cross-examination was to get people to agree to certain standards of behaviour, and then to indicate to them that they would not have infringed those standards of behaviour, and therefore to twist the whole evidence around in that way. So that was that delusion, not delusion, I suppose, but that concern was one of the reasons I went on the bench. Because I love the bar, and but I was very concerned about that, and I was seriously considering not doing any trial work in future, but just doing appellate work for that reason, so that you took you away from that sort of issue. But unless judges it's very difficult for witnesses. And the late Cyril Walsh, who was later a Justice of the High Court, but was a Justice of the Supreme Court, he would reject admissions that Smythe had obtained on the basis that they shouldn't have been obtained, even though they were an admission in talking about civil cases. So, this Smythe technique was, you say you're an honourable man, yes, and an honourable man would have done this, wouldn't he? Or, et cetera, et cetera. And so that was the Smythe technique.
So you were really then ultimately concerned to move from what you saw as a base art to becoming a proper instrument of justice.
Yes, I suppose so. Yes. But I must say I love the bar. Maybe it's a young person's profession. I don't know. It's
They have the energy, but do they have the knowledge and experience?
Well, I've looked at opinions I've written when I was 26 or 27. I can tell you what, nothing I wrote when I was on the High Court or the Court of Appeal or as a silk were better than they were. I've said this publicly, I think that you can tell a good barrister in the first 2 years of practice, you can tell whether somebody's going to be very, very good or not.
And you clearly were.
Well, thank you.
Thank you very much.